For many of us, it's that first real connection with nature on a grand scale. Its expansive beauty so accessible and inviting. Its rugged wilderness a challenge for any adventurer. Beginning as early as 1911, this contested landscape was touted as national park material. But in 1972, all this became the Sawtooth National Recreation Area, administered not by the National Park Service, but by the U.S. Forest Service. How this came to be is a story worth the telling, for it was here at the base of Castle Peak in the White Cloud Mountains that a major environmental battle played out, one that galvanized a constituency for special places and helped elect a governor.
What they wanted to do was a crime. And I said, no, we're not going to let that happen. And we didn't.
It was that defiant no in the heart of the White Clouds that ultimately led to the protection of the Sawtooths. As we mark the 40th anniversary of the creation of the Sawtooth National Recreation Area, it's fair to ask what was gained and what might have been lost, and what is yet to be considered.
Funding for Outdoor Idaho is made possible by the Friends of Idaho Public Television, by the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moores legacy of helping to build the great state of Idaho, by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and the Idaho Public Television Endowment.
The Sawtooths, the White Clouds, the boulders. They're more than just mountain ranges. They represent a vision that more than 40 years ago was considered quite controversial. In fact, some folks didn't think it would work. Hi, I'm Bruce Reichert, and welcome to Outdoor Idaho. Well, we've had 40 years to test the concept of a national recreation area. Has it worked? We'll look around, see what's here, and also what's not here. They are as glorious as any mountain range in North America. More than 40 miles long and 20 miles wide, the Sawtooth Mountains welcome all kinds of visitors. The ones who just want to soak it all in by popular Redfish Lake Lodge. And those who wish to be as far away from the crowd as possible, happy to lose themselves amidst the hundreds of mountain lakes and dozens of peaks over 10,000 feet. The Sawtooths may be Central Idaho's most recognizable mountain range, but it is by no means the only one in this national recreation area. At one end of the vast valley lies the Boulder Mountains, and to the north of them, the White Clouds, a mountain range that in almost any other state would easily get top billing. And it is here, at the base of Castle Peak, where the story of the Sawtooth National Recreation Area begins to take shape. ASARCO, the American Smelting and Refining Company, was no stranger to open-pit mining. And in the 1960s, the company sought to develop another open-pit mine, this one at the base of the largest mountain in the White Clouds, Castle Peak. Their geologists were looking for a strategic metal, molybdenum, that could potentially be worth tens of millions of dollars to the company and its shareholders. Molybdenum is used to harden steel in such things as aircraft engines and nuclear power plants. Advocates said the proposed open-pit mine would supply Custer County with 350 high-paying jobs for many years to come. Besides, they said, hardly anyone ever visited the White Clouds. But in 1969, a young man with a camera did just that. bringing back extensive evidence of what was actually going on in the heart of the White Clouds. It's been more than 40 years, but we asked College of Idaho archivist Jan Bowles to reminisce about what he saw on that backpacking trip.
The first thing we encountered was the Asarco camp at Baker Lake. Then we worked on out toward their claim, and all of a sudden here was a big clearing for the helicopters. A lot of timber had been cut down. Red spray paint blazes on trees showing where roads were intended. A lot of people in there, a lot of machinery, a lot of noise, a lot of dynamite. There were enormous dynamite blasts going off, echoing down the canyon that were really kind of spooky. There were hoses around from water systems. Then just beyond that was the drill rig at Little Boulder Chain Lake number 1, which showed the effluent being dumped right in the water. It wasn't clear anymore. It was that milky turquoise color in the water. There was no doubt in my mind that it would just take an entire drainage and wreck it as far as hunting, fishing, recreation, backpacking, potentially heartbreaking. I did a lot of head shaking.
It was the photos of Jan Bowles and another Idaho photographer, Ernie Day, that brought the grandeur of Castle Peak to Idahoans across the state.
Ernie Day had done aerial photos of Castle Peak early on, actually before we made our trip. His pictures were widely distributed because they were wonderful pictures, and that was very influential. Here was a Christian Science Monitor and a full page devoted to the White Clouds. That showed that the story extended well beyond Custer County, well beyond Idaho. Being part of that was a gratifying feeling.
By 1970, the conflict in the White Clouds had become the hottest issue in the Idaho governor's race. The state's governor at the time, Don Samuelson, argued that mining was what made Idaho great. And besides, he said, the open pit mine would eventually be converted into a new lake. But to his Democratic challenger, Cecil Andrus, the White Clouds represented some of the best that Idaho had to offer.
What they wanted to do was a crime. And I said, no, we're not going to let that happen. And we didn't. That issue alone probably accounted for the margin of victory that I had in 1970, which was about 10 or 11,000 votes.
One of the media outlets was quoted as saying, this really propelled him to be the first governor that was elected on an environmental platform. I didn't expect to find that here in Idaho.
Erica Jensen wrote her university master's thesis on this very controversy.
It was kind of just the perfect storm of the way things came together in Idaho, with it being an election year, the way the tensions had been there and kind of been festering for, really decades. It was an interesting story to find that really, here in Idaho, we were at the heart of the environmental movement.
As often happens, it takes a crisis to motivate policymakers. And plowing a road into the heart of the White Clouds to create an open pit mine was just the crisis to motivate Idaho's congressional delegation. Besides, Idahoans were not oblivious to the growing environmental awareness sweeping the nation. Boyd Norton was one of those who led the charge against Asarco's plans.
I took some photographs of that Henderson mine up near Leadville, Colorado. There was a pile of sludge and muck, heavy metals, and all kinds of carcinogens. So we were able to run photographs and say, do you want this in the White Clouds? There are a lot of people that live in Idaho who may not be hardcore conservationists, but they really appreciate what they have here. And when you have something that's so threatening and damaging as an open pit mine, I think that makes people sit up and take notice.
Norton and his Greater Sawtooth Preservation Council lobbied for a national park, one that would encompass parts of the Sawtooths and the White Clouds.
A national park is something kind of sacred in the minds of many people. So it really was important, we felt, to push for a national park. Of course, later we got talked out of it.
I've met with Frank Church quite a few times, and we decided if you make this beautiful valley a park, it'll attract so many people that they'll tromp over one another. It can't stand that much pressure. Also, you couldn't allow hunting and fishing, which was a big thing here. One of the few times we differed with some of our other conservation friends, we said, NRA is the way to go. Was that right? Was that wrong? I don't know, but that's the way it went.
Former Idaho Congressman Orville Hansen remembers the battle on Capitol Hill to establish the National Recreation Area. In fact, it was his bill on the House side that ultimately carried the day. But Hansen first had to convince the committee chairman, a friend of mining interests, to schedule a hearing. And things were not going well. It took the efforts of Idaho's other congressman at the time, James McClure, to help broker a deal.
He joined my bill. He joined as a co-sponsor of my bill when he finally did that and told the chairman we'd like to have hearings and move this forward. That was what did it.
Still, many in the emerging environmental movement wanted a national park and were looking for ways to scuttle the bill.
Had the environmental movement been organized as it later was, they could have flooded the Congress with telegrams and they could have killed that bill or sent it back to committee. That would be the end of it. Had we not passed that bill at that time, you would be looking wall-to-wall development in this valley. I think maybe one can say the good Lord was with us on this one, and we have preserved and will for all time one of the greatest scenic treasures on the earth.
When the Sawtooth NRA became law in 1972, not only did America have a new national recreation area, but there was also a new wilderness area, the Sawtooth Wilderness, right in the heart of the Sawtooth National Recreation Area. It's a wilderness showcase with more than 200,000 acres of jagged rocks, forested valleys, and alpine lakes. This is an area of stunning vistas and impressive natural wonders.
I think the Sawtooth Wilderness stacks up with, frankly, any wilderness in certainly the lower 48, but I think in the entire U.S., because we have all the classic mountain qualities, great vertical relief, 500 alpine lakes, great opportunities for solitude, all the classic qualities that people think of when they think of wilderness.
Jeff Bitton owns Mystic Saddle Ranch and loves helping people experience these mountains. He's been guiding trips into this amazing landscape for more than 4 decades. And during the next few days, his crew will be providing pack horse support for a family of hikers.
Today we're going to start here at Pettit Lake at the horse transfer camp. We'll climb up over the moraine and back down into the Toxaway Lake drainage, and then up over the top, and you're right in the middle of the Sawtooth, so you get to see all kinds of peaks. And then we'll drop down to Edna Lake where our base camp will be.
This is a dream come true for the Peterman family. To celebrate her 60th birthday, Debbie Peterman chose a horse-supported backpack excursion into the Sawtooth Wilderness. She happily hit the trail with husband Brian, 2 daughters, and a son-in-law.
I said, I'm going to do a big trip with the family for 5 days, just to get the full wilderness experience. When you're out there in the woods and the family's together, it's just really special time, and it's so beautiful. And it's so remote. I just feel like we're the only ones out here.
Start fishing right here.
Starting from Pettit Lake, the group had about 13 miles of hiking to reach their base camp, taking them past several lakes, including Farley, No Name, and Edith. The horses and mules follow, carrying most of the gear and supplies needed for their adventure. As the hikers approach their destination at Edna Lake, they're thankful they didn't have to carry everything in on their backs.
When we saw Edna, we were getting tired. By that time, 10, 11 miles into the hike, When we saw the lake, it was, thank goodness, we're almost there. And of course, it looks like you can just reach out and touch it, and you got about 100 more yards to go, but we still had a couple miles, I think, to get down to the lake, but it just looked absolutely gorgeous.
Having an outfitted trip means they don't have to set up camp. And instead, they can just appreciate the splendor of this place. After a peaceful lakeside evening, a new day dawns on the Petermans' perfect getaway.
It's just a beautiful spot, very quiet. I love the quietness. When I go hiking or get up in the wilderness areas, it's the only time I fish. I just love to do the fly fishing up here in these beautiful places. Everything slows down, and it's just very enjoyable to me, and I know I get a lot out of it.
If they want to experience a wilderness adventure, this is king of the road. I don't think you can top this. This is my favorite place in the whole state.
The purpose of the Sawtooth National Recreation Area is quite specific and beautifully written into law. To assure the preservation and protection of the natural, scenic, historic, pastoral, and fish and wildlife values, and to provide for the enhancement of the recreational values associated therewith. In other words, to not be too much of a burden on those who live here, while still protecting the resource. These days you can find Tom Kovalicki at the local tackle shop in Stanley. But he first came to town as a young Forest Service ranger back in 1970, before the Sawtooth NRA had even become law.
My job, as the Forest Service explained it to me, was you go to Stanley and you make sure that the National Park Service doesn't get the hearts and minds of the local people and turn this into a national park. That was the Forest Service's big fear.
Early on, Kovalicki figured out the secret to winning those hearts and minds.
If the Park Service takes over, there'll be no more hunting. And that is the thing that made people say, we want to talk more about this.
Ed Kennedy has worked among these mountains for more than 20 years.
I liken the National Recreation Area to a national park, only people get to be part of the ecosystem. You can cut firewood, you can graze cows, you can do things you couldn't do in a national park. You can hunt elk and deer, and you can fish. I feel really connected to Yellowstone and Grand Teton because I like those places a lot, but not like I do here. I am part of this place. I think you lose that in a lot of national parks. You go there to look. You come here to really, truly experience.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Sawtooth National Recreation Area. Happy birthday to you.
On August 22nd of 2012, Forest Service personnel and special guests took a moment to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Sawtooth NRA. It was also a time of reflection for one forest ranger.
I wanted to be a part of something bigger. What preserving and protecting was the emphasis of the management. Are we serving the American public the way we need to be? And so I've been thinking about that in terms of the 40 years. And where will we be 40 years from now? Will the Sawtooths look the same? I took this job because I felt very strongly about the values here, caring for the land and serving the people. But I think with the Sawtooth NRA is that meaningful spirituality that people feel when they come here, and the ability to come and be at peace with yourself. And that's the draw of the Sawtooth NRA and why it is called the Gem of Idaho.
These mountains may be renowned for their peaceful and pastoral setting, but they are the product of cataclysmic pressure and force. The collision of two tectonic plates, the continental and the Pacific, directly under Idaho some 50 million years ago. Geologists refer to this as a batholith, a Greek word for deep rock. This deep rock, this intrusion of granite, actually cooled 7 to 9 miles underground. After eons of time and miles of erosion, not to mention an ice age that split and refined the natural vertical jointing of the Sawtooth batholith. This is the result. But it's so much more than raw beauty. This is serious business, the source of water, cold, clear, and abundant, flowing from these mountain peaks in virtually every direction. Idaho's most storied river, the one that stopped Lewis and Clark, the one boatmen know as the River of No Return, has become a force to be reckoned with. And certainly part of that is the yearly journey of these native fish, the sockeye and Chinook salmon and the steelhead, all the way from the Pacific Ocean some 900 miles away. It's the longest and the most difficult salmon migration in the world. But the salmon's life and death and renewal cycle was not always appreciated. The Sunbeam Dam, built in 1910, completely cut off the sockeye salmon's journey to Redfish Lake before dynamite reopened the river in the 1930s. Later, efforts to eradicate undesirable fish species with poison included the sockeye salmon. But today, these ocean-going fish are welcomed and honored. In fact, the legislation creating the Sawtooth NRA specifically mandates the protection and conservation of the salmon.
Sockeye have defied the odds. They're the underdog of the fish world. And we came so close to losing that group of fish. Our single male coming back that had been nicknamed Lonesome Larry is still hanging on the wall as a symbol of the fact we got that low.
This Sawtooth hatchery is funded by the Bonneville Power Administration, the BPA, to compensate for Idaho's loss of fish from the lower Snake River dams.
Today we were removing the Chinook salmon that had moved into the trap overnight. So it's a daily activity starting in June through mid-September.
Back in 1978, the Fish and Game Commission had to close all salmon fishing in the upper Salmon River. The numbers had just gotten too low.
To be able to finally, after 30 years, open that back up for salmon fishing in 2008 was particularly satisfying to me, having been there when we closed it. Right now, you can go up there and see them on the gravel, spawning and completing their life histories.
There's a big fish coming down here onto the nest. Just watch carefully. Oh, great big one. That's probably a 5-year-old.
It certainly makes you realize that within a career span, you can get things done that are important. And we have been able to maintain some level of salmon fishing since 2008 up there.
The Sawtooth Society was formed in 1997 to address two specific threats to the Sawtooth National Recreation Area. The first was inappropriate development, and the second was a deteriorating recreational infrastructure.
The Society has come up with a comprehensive plan, kind of a blueprint for the future. And perhaps most importantly, it has helped secure more than $17 million in funding for conservation easements on much of the private land in the Sawtooth Valley. And that has helped to preserve that view, that remarkable view of which the Sawtooth Society, Congress, and the Forest Service can be justly proud.
What you don't see is what's important. What absolutely blows people's minds when they come over Galena Summit, they look down into the Sawtooth Valley, is they see this wide open expanse. They see the Sawtooths to their left, they see the White Clouds to their right, they see the Salmon River running down the middle of this broad valley, and they can't imagine why it isn't filled up with homes. Looking back 40 years, I think it's been a marked success. That isn't to say that everything is perfect, but it's darn near perfect.
I see a really bright future. I think the people of Idaho are connected enough to this place. They're going to make sure it's protected. They're not going to let us let down our guard, and all the work that those people did 40 years ago, the men and women who fought so hard to protect this place, they're not going to let that go away. That doesn't mean there won't be challenges, there will be. But I think the people of the state have our backs and will not let us get away with anything less than preserving the integrity of the area.
Funding for Outdoor Idaho is made possible by the Friends of Idaho Public Television, by the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moores' legacy of helping to build the great state of Idaho, by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and the Idaho Public Television Endowment. All Outdoor Idaho programs are available for purchase, including hour-long specials. To find more information about these shows, visit us at idahoptv.org.